So we'll call the meeting to order, do a roll call. Heather, could you guide us through the roll? Don't forget to say where you're at.
Yes, and I am going to record this on Zoom. It is already being recorded and aired by CTM, but I always do this as a backup. So here we go with that. Oops.
Recording in progress.
All right, and so roll call. Let me just pull up my list here. We've got Stephen, not here. Jennifer, not here. Alan?
Yes, from Damray, France.
Right. Sarah?
Here from Ann Arbor.
All right. Jeff?
Here from Ann Arbor.
Camilla?
Here from Philadelphia.
Rita?
Here in Ann Arbor.
Alice?
Here in Ann Arbor.
Frank?
Here in Eastport, Michigan.
Adam?
Here in Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Briggs?
Here in Ann Arbor.
And Councilmember Dish is absent. All right.
Okay, excellent. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to approval of the agenda. And Heather had sent out a link to the agenda that was posted on Legistar. Any additions or changes? Frank?
I would suggest that we have kind of a permanent, until we're further along, item on the RFP. There may not be any update, but I think it would be good to just remind ourselves where we're at and what we need to further accomplish on our road to getting an RFP out.
Would you like it? Is it sufficient to have it under the working group updates, or are you asking that it be called out separately?
I guess I don't strongly feel that. I think if it comes up, each meeting under a working group, that would be fine.
Okay. Yeah, Heather's got it in under the one of the working groups, right? It's called out specifically, so that's
all right.
Alan.
Yes, I would like a report on your meeting or efforts toward a meeting with the DDA. That was
okay.
on for a while ago, and you were trying to set it up. So,
yep, I can do that. Yeah, I've met with the DDA director twice now for coffee, so I'm happy to report out on that. I'll do that during member news if that's okay.
Okay.
Any other requests or changes? And if none, can we get a motion to approve the agenda?
Move.
I move.
All right, moved by Alan, seconded by Frank.
Yep.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you. Next is approval of minutes from last time. Those are linked in the agenda. Take a second. If we're feeling good, could we get a motion to approve those two?
I think we can move and then discuss if we need to. So I'll move the approval of the minutes.
Second.
All right, moved by Alice, seconded by Jeff. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. I think the next item is public comment. Do we have any members of the public, Heather?
We do. Robert Black. You should be able to go ahead and speak.
Can you hear me okay, Heather?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. It's lovely to see you all again. Welcome back, those that haven't been here for a little while. I just love this group. I have been reviewing the history of things for this group, and the work that's been done long before you came into this, even back in 1989 when the original library lot task force was going on talking about the future and how that evolved through the 90s. And I led a charrette in 2006 with some graduate students, with Danny Kahn and others from the School of Natural Resources and Environment, about this project. And then there's some really rich history that showed up in 2010 that you have heard from Alan, and especially Alice here. I just want to do a shout out to Alice. If you have time, please go back and review the material that Heather presented links to when you sent out the RFI. It's really helpful. Ms. Ralph's lovely answers to questions that had been received by city staff back in 2010 are really helpful even today. A number of features about the project that would be useful in creating an RFP. Even one I'll mention, I know it's controversial, but an elevated element. There's something in there about that that could be very helpful, and Ms. Ralph's explanation there is extremely important, even from experts like Christopher Alexander, a pattern language. And if you go back to even one other item that's part of the history that will help you with creating an RFP, there's a very simple, easily readable piece with pictures called 10 Principles for Successful Squares from deep history around the world. The piazzas in all the Italian cities, and beyond the comparable communities you have done, these are the roots of that. Looking back, like item number 8, reaching out like an octopus, has to do with moving through the little links past the seva and other things that were mentioned in other studies. And then the last one on that one is number 10, called diverse funding sources. It says a well-managed square is generally beyond the scope of the average city, parks, or public works department, which is why partnerships have been established to operate most of the best squares in the United States. You will hear some examples tonight later about a process of how you might begin to engage the private sector. My contention for you is that you will raise a factor of 10 or more beyond the public sector from the private sector. And so that process will lead to an understanding of how the governance of this site should come about, and more like that. And then, just as a last reminder for your own work tonight in the agenda, Resolution R-20-397 that formed the Council of the Commons actually lists your task, which is the Council of the Commons is an advisory body to council, right? But it says it will build upon the work of the Center of the City Task Force and provide recommendations for the public spaces on the center of the city block. So don't wait for some professional to come along and tell you what they think you should do. Harvest this great work from the history of this, put it into your own filter, and then lay this out as a basis for a really useful RFP that will give you the very best results. So good luck tonight, and I look forward to hearing your discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert. Any other members of the public?
Nobody with their hand raised.
Okay, excellent. Well, welcome. Thank you. And so we'll get right into our agenda here. The first item on the agenda is a presentation on the Initiating Committee business plan. And we have Caitlin Olmsted Phillips, who is going to be making the presentation. There's two attachments you'll note on the agenda. The first is on the business plan presentation, and the second is on the business plan financials. So we'll turn it over to Ms. Olmsted Phillips and ask her to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about what she is planning on. And I think there are some slides or something for her to present. So Caitlin, floor is yours. You are muted as well, by the way.
There we go. We'll unmute. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And it's a pleasure to meet you. An introduction is to my involvement in the project. I was approached in the early spring as people in the parks environment within our family knew that I was seeking a project in Ann Arbor and that I would be able to dedicate some time and focus some energies on a project here in Ann Arbor for the next several years. And someone suggested this project to me with my background and experience. They suggested that this might be a nice fit and I might be able to add something. So I have had the privilege of growing up in the environment with the Olmsted family of engineers and architects who have been park developers and builders. We're celebrating 200 years this year. So as we move forward and we're managing projects across the country, there are many of us that have planning skills that we don't use. And we pick them up along the way and have learned from what we call some of the best in the business. And so I grew up in the environment of planning and developing public spaces. However, I'm not formally trained. So I started a real estate business when the Olmsted family donated our body of work as well as our private holdings to the National Park Service in 1979. At that point, we decided that we were no longer going to produce planners and architects, and that what we would do is protect that legacy going forward. And so we've done that and continue to do that. If anyone wants to follow the work that we've been doing over the past, I'm going to call it 5 years, that project is called Olmsted 200. And I will invite you to go look at that work and see what we've been doing this year. It's been the busiest year, I think, in many decades for us. And so our outward goal this year was to raise $200 million to fund Olmsted Parks as we move forward. And we're happy to report that we are well on our way to reaching that goal for this year. So as I look at this project and I see where we are in the project phase, I'm very pleased to present a plan for activation or gentle activation of the space. So whenever I come into a project, I need to know what the plan is in a way. So I need to be able to know how I can bring resources, how I can match for grants for items that we may be looking for, and how the initiating committee as a whole can serve the Council of the Commons by providing this data that you all may not be able to have time to do or to put together on your own. And so what I've done is basically to bring myself up to speed as well as the initiating committee is I've done basically what we call an assumptive financial planning worksheet. That financial planning worksheet is purely assumptions that are like kind, and the worksheets are just to give me a baseline idea of what it's going to really cost actually to navigate and to open up gently the space. And how are we going to raise those funds? What's our development plan? Because everything costs money, and we do know that it costs money. And so how are we going to go out there and create a funding plan? And then one of the first questions I also really had was creating a branding strategy for the entire project that we all agree upon and that we can develop and grow together, to gather a following for the project that is universally appreciated and accepted, I think is also a place to start. So as I come into a project and I look at what kind of where the early development phases start, it's not very exciting. So I must say, as we look through, it's a lot of organizational pieces that have to be put together for a project like this. So what I'd like to do is take you through the plan, if I can, very quickly, and then I'd love to have you all review it on your own. Your feedback and input is very important because all of this is assumptive. So now what we really want is the Council of the Commons to come back and say, this is feasible, this is something we'd like to explore beginning. This is a plan that we could not agree with and it would need to be changed to fit our vision in this way. And we can make those changes and we can work together to figure out how we further this along. And so without further ado, if it's okay, I would like to share my screen. Is that okay? If I just do a share screen? All right. So as we go through, hold on one moment here. Sorry, hold on 1 minute here. I'm very much not used to presenting on Zoom. So hold on one second. I need to. Okay. So. Okay. And then hold on 1 minute. I see my movie makers open, so I see the confusion here. All right. Oops. Okay. Let's see. Share screen. Share. Okay. I will minimize this. I'll just go in here and open this up.
Perfect.
Yes, thank you guys. I'm so sorry. Thank you for your patience here as we go through. Okay. Sorry, that's another project that I'm working on right now. All right. Hold on, I'll open it. And then I'm not sure, does it matter if this is full screen? I'm not sure how to make this full screen down here.
It shouldn't matter.
Okay, yeah, okay. So as we go through, it just yeah.
This is Erica. I just wanted to let you know. Right now, we're just seeing the Zoom kind of home screen. So we may be seeing a different screen than you are right now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hold on. Let's see. New share. And here we are. And share. All right. And let's see do we have a presentation there?
Yep, we see it. Yeah, and
Okay.
so then once you're in this, if you did want to, I was thinking about full screen in a different way.
Yeah,
But if you wanted to make the document full screen, you can. If not, if other people can see it all right, then it's fine the way it is.
Okay, great. So basically, this just kind of goes through a little bit about what we hope the initiating committee acts as a citizen advisory board created to support and develop planning and strategies to assist with the facilitation of the Center of the City project. The initiating committee, in my opinion, would work to support the efforts of the Council of the Commons. So this report, what we're presenting today, is basically a 10-year plan for activation. So this is a 10-year business plan and financial worksheets, assumptions that go over gentle activation through development, actually, and how it would be programmed and what that may look like. Then there are financial assumptions workbooks. All of the figures that have gone into the presentation are included in extensive Excel spreadsheets that break all of the financials down to a budget that could be a template to start some financial assumptions for the project. I don't know if that's already been done, but I have to do them so I understand what things are costing and what fundraising goals could be and things like that. So I thought I'd include them for you all. Then I'd like to just look at the review and the collaboration of the project, just to kind of get us all on the same page. So what I would love to do is just the initiating committee and the Council of the Commons, we all need to be able to work together with parks and with other organizations and the city to be able to kind of get onto one vision, the same vision. And so I'm looking to see from the Council of the Commons what that vision means for you all and how we can assist in providing what you need to make the vision go further down the development track. So then also we're going to talk just a little bit today about proximity principle assumptions. I was able to pull the proximity principle assumptions from all of the actual parcels that surround our space here in Ann Arbor. And so I'm going to provide those figures as well as we go through looking at tax value increases that could be dramatically enhanced by this project. So firstly, I'd like to just go into the steps and our idea of what the steps of activation would look like.
Caitlin, excuse me
yeah.
1 second. I'm sorry. Yeah, I think you might want to do a view and full screen, because what we see is your thumbnails on the side. And
okay.
I think that I just wanted to give you that feedback.
Yes, no, thank you. Where does anyone know how
Up at the top, look in view.
Okay. Oh, I see.
Your,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I have a. Okay. I have my computer. This computer that I'm on is very old school, and I cannot. Yeah. There's a bar that is there we go. Hold on one moment. Sorry. Thank you. Need to relocate.
If it doesn't work, we'll be okay.
Well, no. Let's see. Where does it go full screen?
Next to help, there's a thing called view. And I think that will, you see help? On the top row of options.
Yeah.
To the left of it is help, is view.
Yes.
And I think that will let you do a full screen.
Just normal? Is that what it is?
I don't know.
No, yeah, I don't either.
Okay, just go with it.
Okay. No, that's okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know how to make this. I'm usually presenting this face to face with hand printed copies, and okay. So here we go. So what we think we so you guys cannot see this at all.
We can.
Oh, you can. Okay. So what we're looking at is a 10-year business plan. And really figuring that out and getting the Council of the Commons input on that business plan to say, okay, what are fundraising goals? How many funds are needed? What is the development cost of the space in total? Would that, be divided up over, a number of phases or a number of years? Then we look at an operations plan. So how would activating the space, what would be the plan for that? And generating and creating an operations plan that is going to outline specifically staffing and stewardship, annual programming, a simplified permitting and insurance process for the space, social media strategy to build a following for the space, beautification plans and occupancy and booking strategies to make that process easier. Right now, I know that there's a lovely representative from the city of Ann Arbor managing the booking and reservations for the Liberty Plaza space. It was really exciting to see that there were activities happening there this year. And so we'd like to figure out how we could collaborate possibly with that individual and bring some service to that role as well. And just enhance that role in a way. And then we are including financial reports, which are important as we come to a project to really understand what the financial picture is. And in those financial reports is included activation inventory assumptions, so just assumed cost, pretty researched, but assumed cost for what the actual elements would cost to activate the space gently, how those elements could be added without causing conflict to the environment in any way, and respecting the built environment and respecting what we have there. So we are sensitive in the planning to the fact that we cannot puncture the structure in any way for the parking structure. And so there are some things that we've researched there to make sure that this plan is cognizant of those building conditions, of those space conditions. And then what we'd like to do is just kind of have a section as we go forward and be able to consistently enhance the benefit of promoting inclusivity and collaboration with immediate adjacent partners, the City of Ann Arbor, Liberty Plaza, the DDA. I think we can go a long way to support each other together. If we've got one vision as we move ahead, we can go a long way in supporting one another and making the space a truly unique and beautiful space. And then we look at an activation timeline. So really putting an activation timeline together to be able to say, okay, what are the activities that are needed to make this project work, and how can we as an initiating committee assist, and what can we provide that could be useful in these early phases. So we do understand that there is a wait to raise money for the RFP, and we do understand that there's a wait while that process is in play, and all of these organizational things can be done simultaneously with those activities, with all of us together in unison, just creating excitement and energy about the project. The other thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to do some very serious investigating and reporting on operational organization. So if we're to activate the space, we need to look at other special projects for operational organizational practices that are being used and that we could also use. We are going to have to sit down and figure out if we are fundraising and we are getting commitments for people to donate, how is that money being generated, and where is it being funneled through? So that would need to be brought up as well as we all move forward to find out, to find a mechanism that could handle the operations of a fundraising opportunity. And then also one thing that we find is that as projects such as this go out to the public for grant application and for funding opportunities, some of these are very public entities. So in some cases, the project may be asking for a very large grant from the National Urban Parks Association, from the National Association of Urban Parks. In that case, we find that in our experience, having very structured and cohesive communication style is very beneficial to the project as the project moves forward. And these are things that we find once set into place very early in the process, that these communications and that this what we're going to call evidence of capability, if these communications are it has to be included as part of a package that is going to be for funding. We do really love to be able to provide very structured communications where we're all communicating in a communication style that's formal and that can be saved, and that can be used again. So then also the project, we would love to help put together the branding strategy for the project, and put together some samples of branding packages that the council could vote on, or that we could all vote on, to figure out a cohesive branding strategy that we're all in agreement with. And we do have the talent and potential within our team. We have Amy Rowe, who's just incredible, and she's been working to set up organizational tools such as a Trello deck, and we've got some other folks involved. We've got Matthew Altruda sitting in on our meetings. We're so grateful. He's got a wonderful insight into local branding strategy, which is really fun from his experience with the Bank of Ann Arbor. And so as we move forward, we do think that a branding strategy is very important. When we talk with comparing projects and we talk with their social media strategists, such as Bryant Park being a very good sample. We've got 3 or 4 other samples, one in St. Louis, Missouri. These projects typically boast the largest following of any organization in the city when it's complete. So the impact of the social media following that a project like this could possess is very great, especially in a city as as media connected as Ann Arbor is. And so there's a tremendous branding potential in this project to gain followers from every walk, and both visitors and locals alike. So coming up with a unified and universal branding strategy is going to be one of the very first things that we would suggest to do in these early stages. And something that we could all come on board with, agree with, and support going forward. So then as we get into phase 2, the other thing that is going to have to sort of be created in the beginning is some sort of volunteer program. So when an urban park comes into a city, and that city is not very well-versed or might not be prepared to take on the salaries of park and staff management in the beginning. And so what happens is we find tremendous success in creating volunteer programs that help us with these early phases of organization. So we have a lot of talented professionals that are well versed in these items of organization and articles of organization that could also assist us in creating a very consistent volunteer program that could be nurtured and enhanced as we move forward. And so I think that there would be a great benefit to enhancing a volunteer program for the project, and something that the council could rely on and be a part of creating as well, and something that could remain and allow for very consistent programming within the space. And so that would mean getting volunteer commitments and training and things like that. So we have added putting a volunteer program in. And then funding development. So at the very, very early stages of any project, we know that projects of this nature and this size are going to be ranging, depending on their elements included, anywhere from 10 million to the upwards of the most expensive I've seen per square foot is 31 million. I don't know that we have to go that high. That's a very high cost to build. But with these projects, what we want to know is that we've got a plan to fund the project. And so what we're doing is creating a funding development program that's consistent, that's approved, that's acceptable, and that has our donors getting both grant funding and funds to the right people in the right place. And so as we look at creating a funding development plan, it'll be very, very important. Part of that funding development plan is to create what we call a grant application calendar. And so every year what we do is we go through during the winter months and we search grant opportunities and large funding opportunities through organizations, and we see what applications will fit our project, and then we create a grant application calendar so we know when those applications have to go in and when all the information has to be compiled, and that grant, we fit the criteria. I think that selecting grants is one of the most time-consuming and difficult processes. And if we can assist the Council of the Commons in vetting and meeting their requirements to prepare to submit grants, I think that would be something that could truly help us all along as well. And if we have that experience and we have the folks with the depth of knowledge to be able to help with that in these early stages, it's really a nice thing to be able to know that you've got some funding, just some action for funding happening. And then, of course, we're all going to sit down and talk in these early stages about programming. And we're going to have to figure out and agree upon a programming plan that we're all very consistently proud of. So if we do programming in the space, if, we want to kind of look into what does a programming plan look like? What are the types of activities we would all want to see in the space? Do we have an open reservations program where institutions can come and reserve the space? Of course, we want to encourage that. And so we'll just have that conversation around programming in the future. And then an operations plan, really sitting down and presenting an operations plan that states this is how we are going to operate the space. And these are the roles that we're going to have, and these are what those duties are going to entail. and things like that as we move forward for organization. And then in phase 3, we come to really the fun part. I think it starts getting really, really fun in phase 3. So once our branding strategy is sort of on the way, we know what that is. We've got a list of activities to do. We're getting closer in phase 3 to having an operations model be acceptable. We've gone out and we've had a lovely campaign to encourage partnership participation. We've, by this time, by phase 3, we've pretty much got our partnerships, kind of solidified. We've got a lot of support at this point. We've started a general fundraising campaign by the time we get to phase 3, and we start then saying, okay, let's start using the money that we've raised to start buying the inventory that we need to be able to start to connect with the public and be able to start to do some things in the space. So as we look forward there, we will be happy for that day. So there's in the financial worksheets, there's a full breakdown of just an assumption of what that inventory might be and what it might look like. So please review that at your leisure. And then as we go through, just to see what a timeline looks like, what the phases look like, as we go through here, we're wanting to just kind of see what that looks like. So as I'm looking at this.
Can you scroll that down a little bit?
Yeah, I'm scrolling it down. Here we go. So,
there.
Yeah, I figured it out. Sorry. Okay, so here we go. So as we look and we say, okay, we're going to, for us, for the initiating committee, this is basically for our committee too. So we're presenting an activation plan. We're gathering feedback. You all are working on releasing the RFP, which is great. That's in there. Then make input adjustments to the activation plans. Then we can kind of over the winter time look at determining a unified branding strategy going forward. We can also create an organizational platform that we all love and use. Right now we're using the Trello deck. It's wonderful for project organizational tool. And so of course we'd love folks to have access to that from the council if they'd love that too. Then we can develop some operational plans, and all these things can happen over the winter. And then we can start actually creating social media accounts and begin creating content for approval. It doesn't need to be released, but we would want everyone's approval on that content going forward, of course. And then we can develop and facilitate block partner support in the spring. So as we look at that, we're looking at having some events on the space that would promote and just promote relationship building and give some people some information about where we are in the process, how they can support us, how they can volunteer, things like that. And then again in that spring and summer, kind of developing some active fundraising development plans and goals. So the organization of a funding plan for a project of this magnitude takes time. And so to be able to do these kinds of things in 2023 would be wonderful to have them behind us as we move forward into that 2024 year. And so as we move into 2024, we are aware that that is kind of a special year. That our bicentennial? I do believe that's Ann Arbor's 200th. And so we would like your help and the help of the council kind of filling in some things that we could do in 2024 that would be in keeping with the bicentennial celebration in promoting the space and suggesting others to promote the space. And then here we get, then nextly, what we're going to do is move into some financial documents that we feel passionately about. I think that as we think about the idea of hosting a public campaign, we really need to build value in the project. As we file for grant applications and as we ask for large stewardship donations to the project, one of the things that those grant applications of recipients are going to ask is, how is the city going to benefit from this project? And what can you expect in return? As a city and as a city development organization, what can you expect in return for this? And so here we investigate that with each project that we start. And what we want to know is, how is it going to affect the neighboring properties, and especially in an urban situation. When we look at proximity, we look at quality of life, we look at the importance of a green space in our Ann Arbor, and how do you calculate the value for that? My initial value is we live and work and breathe and play here, and there's an emotional connection for me that has a little bit more to do with this than numbers. However, the numbers are here and we need to all look at them so we can develop. So as we look at these numbers, we're looking at revenue calculations that have been based on comparable project research. So the qualifications for this project that we used are projects that are under 1.5 acres, that are located in urban downtown areas, that service approximately between 100 and 500 guests and visitors at its maximum occupancy, and also had similar building conditions. So these are properties that were already surrounded by large infill and large infrastructure challenges and concerns due to the fact that these spaces the infrastructure had already been developed. So in each of these cases, these green spaces were laid on top of heavy duty infrastructure, whether that be transportation or whether that be parking structures. So we will be in future, my next project will be to draft a report for all of you that includes much more finite detail about those comparables and what their experience has been over the last 20 years of activation. Sometimes we look at the first 20 years, really, is what we like to see initially. So then when we look at the financial forms, we need to know that activation revenue from the project itself is calculated at a national average of 26% per year. So when we look at growth, we look at a standard business model of 26% per year. When we look at, and then these calculations also factor in a very conservative booking rate. So what we're giving you today is not the space fully activated in all of its capability. You're going to see a graduated level of occupancy as we build into programming the space regularly. So it is an elevated budget that reflects the growth. Then also the comparable project occupancy booking rates have been above 90% 10 years post-activation. So once we look beyond 10 years, it is above 90 with an average of about 97 to 98 with a nice large wait list for the bigger events. So the booking does continue to increase and people book over and over. So the booking also becomes an easier role as people enjoy the space and book for next time. So then also, once the space is established financially, what we see is a very modest 18% increase in operational expenses per decade for properties that are landlocked and cannot expand. So when we're in a site that really can't go any further from a land use perspective, once the space is established and once the space is staffed, there are very, very modest increases in operational expenses. Same situation for the National Park Service projects as well. Once operations are put into play, The only really thing that you have is cost of living salary increases for operations as you go forward. So the cost to continue operations is much lower than the startup. So as we come down and look, we say, okay, how does that look for our Ann Arbor? How does the proximity principle affect us? So the proximity principle in this particular case, with an urban park that is so walkable, we take the properties that are in a zone within 3,000 feet of every perimeter of that park space. And we pull up all of those tax records, and we pull out all of the tax exempt properties, and then we note the properties with historical designation as those will depreciate, have been depreciated through their designation and will not be developed in the future. So their future development potential is noted when they're in the historic district or have a designation. So we pull all of those out. We determine basically what the zone is and how far away from the park will people stop benefiting. So here we have a rather large zone because everything is so walkable. And so what we're looking at in this slide is the actual assumptions. So if we look here, we have 1,043 neighboring parcels with a taxable value in 2022 of $240,000. And that actually starts us today. Okay, so we're taking this in 10-year increments to see what this looks like every 10 years. The cost to develop the park should be, we don't know this figure, this is a gross assumption at this point, but it could be about $15 million for the first decade. Then we're looking at additional future units proposed. I have that figure coming from the Director of Building Services is getting me the additional new units being proposed and built right now that are permitted within the zone. There are several units coming. And then also the assumed cost of development, let's just call it 15 there. And then the operating expense for the park over the 10-year period of time is going to be $3 million, basically. Then we have the gross revenue from the park is going to be $3 million in the first decade. So it's interesting that aside from the cost of development, the revenue generated should be able to operate the park without a huge deficit. So here we show the park in the first 10 years generating a very small, tiny bit of money that probably is not a reality once these assumptions are made finite. But then we do see the park in the next decade supporting itself. And then we see the park in the third decade actually generating revenue on an annual basis for the city. So this is kind of just the research that I've done for this particular project in looking at Ann Arbor and what the motivation is to continue the project moving forward. It's also nice to make these, to work a bit more, frankly, to go deeper here. And it's very nice to have this as part of a grant application. So any officiating grant supervisor can look at this and really see what the benefit is to the city and want to invest in it for us as well. So then we have a quick slide here that just talks about what the first 10 years of funding would look like from an operational perspective. This does not include the development of the space because right now those figures are too gross. But what I wanted to highlight is that in the first decade, we certainly could raise funds to operate the space. And I think we could build a volunteer network that would also allow us to manage the space with some guidance. One of the major benefits here, I think, is that we have so many lovely people that have been involved in maintaining the space. We've got a lot of activities going on in the space right now that are very positive. And as we look, one of the possible solutions, as I have researched the project and also spoken to several people about the concerns of creating a more positive and equal environment in Liberty Plaza, is one of these roles would be to hire a superintendent to manage the block, a block superintendent of sorts. And that is one of the solutions that I've deeply thought about as I've looked at the challenge of Liberty Plaza. I do park in the Library Lane parking structure every day. I do go through the park day and night. I am often you'll see me trekking through. So the space is special to me. The people in it have become like neighborly, right? So I have never had a negative experience in the park, and I know that has not been others' experience. However, I do believe that just the constant and consistent presence of leadership in the space would go a dear long way to having and encouraging everyone to behave themselves while using the space. So we always kind of lean toward a superintendent, a kind-hearted, caring superintendent that could keep the peace in the space. And that may be old-fashioned, and it may be something that we couldn't consider right away, but I would love to consider it as we begin fundraising and we begin planning the activation of the space, to consider some roles that would help the efforts along here. And all of those positions and all of those suggestions are located within the financial worksheets that I've included. And I want to just thank you very, very much for your time and consideration and allowing me to be a part of the project and sharing my findings as I organize myself to see what's possible there, and to introduce myself to helping on the project. So I just want to say thank you so much to everyone involved with the initiating committee that provided me with a lot of information that allowed me to put this together. And thank you. This has given me a very, very well-rounded, all views points on the project thus far, and possibly what we could be doing to help one another going forward. So thank you again for the time.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. Why don't we go back to, if you could maybe stop sharing your screen. We
Yep.
could go back to, yes, perfect. See if there are questions at all.
No questions for me, but thanks for the presentation. It was great.
Yeah.
I have one quick question, and I'm sorry if you mentioned this and I just did not hear it. Who, you talked a lot about grant, reaching out or trying to get grants from other organizations and how that might work. What are you, who are you targeting?
Oh, there's a list? Yeah, not at all. I don't mind at all. I put all of our target fundraisers in the worksheets that I sent over to Heather. So as you open those worksheets, there should be one there that says funding plan. And
Okay.
so, yeah, so as you look at that worksheet, these are funders that have participated in funding and assisting with the funding of large projects like this, that are urban, that are the same size, that are the same type, and that bring what we call the lungs to the center of the city. So you have a lot of support from these local groups, some of them local, some of them not local. So some of these are national and federal supporters that the Olmsteds bring. There is also a large number of local businesses and partners that should be approached. This is just simply what we could bring. These folks have been approached. We do have permission to reach out to these. The list of folks that I've presented here, we have had that Olmsted conversation of saying this is something we're working on, we're passionate about, and we need your help. And so can you help us identify grants and give us volunteer folk? And so that's just kind of our reach out. But yeah, those are the folks that we would would begin to approach along with a large list of locals. I think that in the RFI, the response to the RFI that Robert Black submitted, he submitted a beautiful list of block partners there, and that probably could be combined with that, and a universal effort be created to go forward with some funding requests. Yeah.
Great, thanks. I'll take a look at that. So the reason I was asking, I used to work on a parks initiative with the Urban Land Institute and their partnership in the 10-minute walk campaign. And a lot of grants recently have been really, really focused on park poor areas, which, I mean, you could, I guess, argue with like an influx of people, but like Ann Arbor is not really a park poor city. And so I did some investigating about a year ago too, and just like, what are there organizations out there that would fund something like this? And I didn't find anything at the time. So I was just curious. I mean, like, I think you have a little bit deeper experience with this than I do, but I was just curious who you thought might fund some of these things. So I'll take a look at that worksheet.
Yeah, take a look at that worksheet. And it's interesting because what happens is when we talk to these organizations, they will connect us with others. And so it's sort of a chain link reaction of positivity. So they'll say, oh, we do want you to reach out to the Gates Foundation. They helped us fund a project not last year. Or we do want you to reach out to this NRC conservation group that's giving grants for providing education in regards to solar and the benefits of solar. So it's interesting as we go through these phone calls in this process, more unfolds. It's great.
Great. Thanks so much, Caitlin.
Sure.
And I think Camilla has her hand up.
Yeah. Is it okay if I have a comment and not a question?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for being here, Caitlin, and volunteering your time and expertise. I'm going to make a bold statement, and it's not directed at one person, definitely not at you, Caitlin, but I just think it's just a general statement for all that are listening. I think that most people in the room can agree that we operate in a democracy that serves to aid the planning process, and the planning process that the city of Ann Arbor follows is one that values all perspectives equally. And I think that for a long time, we've been favoring the initiating committee and its various entities. And I believe the initiating committee members speak the most at our meetings and take time away from hearing from other people and organizations. And it often feels like the initiating committee is bypassing certain democratic processes like the RFI and the RFP process and using coded language. Sometimes their presentations give simple suggestions on activation to the council, and other times announce actions that they will take with or without the consent or collaboration with the Council of the Commons. And it's extremely political. So Caitlin, you said that you were here to get feedback from us and to scope out the project. I just finished my graduate degree in urban planning, and one of the main things that I learned was how to plan with and not for the community. And I don't think that the initiating committee represents the entire community. In fact, it represents a minority of Ann Arbor residents. And I realize that I'm making a provocative statement, but I don't get a lot of airtime in this space, and I want my voice to be heard. It's been an hour into our meeting, and I'm frankly tired of hearing the same spiel every single meeting. Thank you for listening.
Any other questions at all for Caitlin? Heather, yeah.
I just had a question about the financials, and if I'm understanding it right, it sounds like what's being proposed is a TIF model of revenue. Is that the case? Am I understanding that correctly?
I'm going to be very honest with you. When I'm working with national parks projects, I'm unsure what that might be. So I may be looking to, I'm unsure that it is a specific model or what that would look like. I'm very apologetic. I do not possess, like Camille, a degree in urban planning. I wish I did. So I may seek some advice as to if I am presenting what would be a TIF model, and how you all would contribute and what your suggestions would be for a financial model or funding model that would work.
Yeah, by TIF model, I mean tax increment financing. So setting a baseline and then moving forward from that. And the reason I'm asking is because this isn't a TIF district already, so that additional revenue is already being captured.
Okay. Yeah, that's something that I would need to know a little bit more information about. At this point, I do not have the revenue coming in for the project is at this point all self-generated and volunteer and grant driven. I do not at all have the expertise, I'll be honest enough, to calculate or to put together a tax incremented program. That would be something that we would be seeking help from in regards to you. In looking at how these projects are funded from an amateur perspective, we would be looking or investigating something like possibly a sales tax, or possibly a small sort of city tax for those that wanted to participate. But it would be an optional community buy-in as well. It would be the option. It was my understanding that at this point, it would not be considered to be the best idea from the initiating committee to present a funding model for the bigger vision, frankly. That would be something that we would really rely on Parks and the Council of the Commons and the city to guide us on as well.
Alice.
Yes, I'm sorry to see that it appears that Camilla is not with us on this screen anymore anyway, but I do appreciate her bold statement. I think it's worth listening to again. I think we have, I think we need to be sure we know who we are. Even though I am aware of the development of Caitlin's extensive dive into data and planning issues, it's an incredible presentation, and I mean that in a good way. But the emphasis on the initiating committee seems to conflict with the cooperative efforts that we are trying to establish, even with the block partners. And it is a lot confusing when the pronouns we are used, and I don't even think I feel like I'm part of we. I don't really know who we are. If it's the initiating committee that's being represented, it's not clear that that was the intention. And if it is not the initiating committee, I don't see how our efforts as the Center of the City Commission are reflected in the idea that someone else is going to be doing this and that we will promote what someone else has done. It's just a little confusing, and I can see where Camilla's point of view comes into play. So I needed to say that.
All right. Thanks, Alice. Any other questions at all for Caitlin? Rita.
Hi, thanks, Caitlin. I just want to acknowledge that the significant amount of work that you did, and that I feel that you were offering that this as an opportunity for us to have a model for something to do, to follow, and that I didn't feel that you were offering it as a rigid approach either. I think that it is a way to start some discussion, to get us to ask some questions on particular things so that we can test out ways to move forward. So that's my particular statement. And I would like to have us discuss it enough to see where it can integrate with the direction that we need to do to go forward with. And I would love to hear Camilla's comments on inclusion that we appear to have missed, and that is absolutely not addressing anything that you've said, Caitlin, which I very much appreciate. Thanks.
Thanks.
Frank.
I just I want to, I guess, echo Rita's comments and express my appreciation. I've gotten to know Caitlin over the last several months, and her store of knowledge, personal store, and as well as her connections through the Olmsted Heritage and the National Park Service, she represents an enormous resource. And I think, however it is provided, I welcome it, and I would encourage her continued pursuit of this process of study, et cetera. And I don't, I'll have to process more earlier statements, but the initiating committee has been active, and I don't think in any negative way. I mean, we're all trying to pursue this idea of a park and commons in downtown Ann Arbor, and we welcome other groups to get involved either with the initiating committee or on their own and coordinate. And I have sensed that there has been a lot of progress, the green team, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to underscore my appreciation to Caitlin. I mean, I can't even imagine having the background to put together this presentation, which alludes to a lot more as we move along and develop this. And I just want to express my appreciation, and I thank you again, Caitlin.
Oh, thanks. It was fun it was very fun doing it, Frank. Thank you. And it's been such a gift and a pleasure to work with all of you. Alan has been such a knowledge in the history and the cultural, the cultural vision of what we, kind of I think all are on the same page with that. And for me, sometimes the numbers, aren't fun, but it does give me a starting place. It's like my diving board. So it just gives me a place to launch from, and a way to introduce myself to the project. And thank you.
Excellent. Any other, Alan, your hand's up on.
Yes, well, thank you, Caitlin. You dove into the detail, and in terms of the initial, what you call light activation, and that is before there's any significant transformation of the space as to how we connect Liberty Plaza and the library, laying the surface, how we connect with the library, where a civic center building and internal functions fit. That's all sort of in the RFP process that is coming up. This is just looking, from straight out analysis of parks all over the place, that this is a viable economic proposition for the city that will have ramifying benefits as time goes on. And that's what I think is particularly useful. Just from where we are, we can start and have a confidence that this little park area of less than 1.5 acres can actually be a viable contribution to the city economy as well as to the benefit of the people. And so this is a first stage, and it references the RFP and the further stages that are actually going to involve a lot more money and how we transform the space more physically. But thank you very much for bringing all that knowledge together. I hope people will just read all the detail that you put together and the financial sheets. And I think it would be useful after people do actually have a chance to read over, that in our next meeting we have a special meeting, our next meeting be to evaluate what you've actually put together that this immediate activation and the inventory that is needed, we give a consideration to, so this can actually have some momentum to it. You definitely gave it a kick forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. I don't see any other hands up. So Caitlin, just wanted to say thank you on behalf of the council and appreciate the presentation, very detailed, and we certainly will take a look at the materials that were attached to the agenda. I have not had a chance to read the report, so I'm sure others are in the same boat, and we'll take a look. So
thank you. Thank you very much for having me, everybody, and good night.
Okay. Have a nice evening.
Thanks.
All right. Excellent. And so our next agenda item is a member news and updates. I'm happy to kick things off by just discussing, as Alan asked. I did get a chance to meet with the new DDA director, Jeff Watson, a couple of times. We've gotten together for coffee, and both were, I think, very nice, constructive. I filled him in a little bit about what the work that had been going on here and in the working groups, as well as some of the questions that came up during the PAC presentation. It was not an express goal of mine to advance something during these conversations. They were just get to know each other and talk a little bit about where I thought the group was going, and some rough timing milestones around an RFP, and sort of what we had gotten back as feedback from an RFI process. So I would say that's about it. I don't mean to sound vague. It was not intended to be a get to a certain point style of conversation. It was more just intended to talk through where things were at, and so that's my update as it pertains to what you were asking about, Alan. I've not met with anybody else from the DDA. It's just been the director. Are there other members who would like to give news or updates further outside of the working groups? We'll get into the working groups next. Alan, yeah.
Yes, always have an update. Odile and I are still in France. We'll be back, it seems, on the 12th of September. The particular update is to invite you all to the International Day of Peace, which is Wednesday, the 21st of September. This is an annual endeavor by the United Nations to bring people to a consciousness of world peace and local peace. And so we are activating the space for that day. And I hope people will actually come and participate. The theme of the United Nations is end racism, build peace. There'll be a program dealing with the situation of racism of the African American community. I've mentioned before that this is also the decade for people of African descent. The question of reparations is dealt with all over the country at this time, and hopefully there'll be some motion toward a resolution toward policy in the city of Ann Arbor on that question. Also, there will be the discussion of land return as well as land acknowledgement in the relation to the indigenous people, the Potawatomi people, and the Three Fires Confederacy, whose exit from here corresponded to the beginning of Ann Arbor. There'll also be some discussion of public art in the commons, murals that are being discussed, the design of the place, the kind of art people want to see there. And that's, again, something that members of the Council of the Commons would have a great interest in, I would expect. And the bicentennial is also be something that will be discussed. This is one of the functions of the council of the center of the city commons is fostering a culture of peace and nonviolence. This came out of the center of the city task force and emphasized also in the city council affirmation of those recommendations. So how that is reflected in our bicentennial will begin a discussion on the commons and many other things. I will send you all the evolving draft of the program, and would be very happy if people wanted to participate, bring your own ideas into the effort if you feel you're not being represented. And see that this is a place, the center of the city is a place for all of us. So I hope all of us will get together and have a good time on the International Day of Peace, Wednesday, the 21st of September. Thanks.
Thanks, Alan, and please feel free to share those materials, and they can be added to the packet.
Yeah.
Okay. Other member news or updates? Okay. Well, let's go into the working group updates then. And, these are standing items on the agenda. So we can, some of these may have very little movement at times, and at other times there might be more. So I think the first one up is the comparable communities. Frank or Rita, I'm a member of that, but Frank or Rita, do you have any updates?
Just briefly, we're intrigued by, but have not really started communications with the group out in Chelsea. They're working on a urban park just south of the main downtown area on Main Street, and it looks very interesting, and it's kind of embryonic stages, but it seems to have a lot of energy from what I can read online and in the newspaper. So we're going to be connecting with them soon.
And I have a question about our working group specifically, and that is, do we want to set some benchmarks in terms of like how far do we go? How many comparables are we going to set for ourselves? And at some point, it's sort of like, can we just assess and pick out the best and move forward? So my question is, although I'm very interested in the option of looking at Chelsea and how they're proceeding, I would like us to use what we have and move forward. So it's a little expression of impatience. So is there any guidance on our group?
Well, maybe maybe one of the goals of tonight is that over the next 4 weeks, before our next meeting, all of the groups can get together and set forth maybe a plan for the next 4 months till the end of the calendar year. And including in that could be some goals for the limits. Does that sound like a fair fair challenge, I guess, for each of the groups?
Yeah.
Okay. I like that idea. Alice and then Alan.
I too am part of the Comparable Communities Working Group. I also know that we are out there in the community challenged, not directly, but challenged by the public in making progress. So, I think we have made this challenge to the working groups before, and I think you meant not all of the groups, but each of the groups. Is that correct? That we don't want to all meet together because that would not be correct.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I meant. Individual groups.
But I think we should, I mean, it's good that we're going to try to we're going to put that on the agenda, but we should be giving clear direction, as in by this next meeting, we want this submitted before the meeting so that it can be validated or challenged or whatever, but to show that we are going to make some progress. I think all of us have been meeting for quite some time, but we are dominated by the few events that take place on the site, which aren't really progress. They're just a different location for the same things that are happening, and yet doesn't move our project forward. Not to cast aspersions on any type of group or any event. It's just that we're not moving forward. And I think the public sees that because they don't see anything. So once we have these results for next month, what are we going to do? We need to know what the plan is from each working group, or what is suggested by the results of their work. We really need to get pretty nitty gritty and fast, because this will be one more month that we don't have the funds for the RFP, one more month that we don't know how we're going to get them, one more month that may result in more confusing issues about procedure. In fact, I'm told that now Parks is going to write the RFP. Did we know that? Are we going to do that? I mean,
yeah. Alice, I will say, one, we did talk about that a little bit at the last meeting. None of that has been decided. And I think it's been an expressed goal of this group that it be a joint RFP process. We did make the request to PAC. We have not gotten, we've not really pursued a follow-up since our end of July meeting with PAC either. I will take that action item to pursue follow back and along with Erica and Stephen around that item. But I do want to put a plug in. We did meet about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I guess, with this group, and we had made fundraising progress. So this group met at the 17th of August, which was only a couple weeks ago.
Which group? I'm confused. Which
this group. This group.
You mean our
Council of the
commission?
Con.
Met with. Yeah. Well, okay.
Yeah.
I was there, but there was no. I did not hear any plan. I just heard that there would be future talks, and then in writing, I got the message that Parks was going to manage their RFP, and so I'm pretty confused.
Okay. Well,
Can you straighten it out now? I mean, if you seem to have an idea of what's happening, I don't have a clear idea because it's getting conflicting messages.
I know what I said, and that's the extent of what I know.
Okay.
All right, Alan.
I hope you understand my I mean, you say one thing, another person says another thing, then I get a message externally from something else. And talk about a communications plan. We don't have one.
Okay. Alan?
Right on, Alice. You raise a problem. Back to the comparable communities, what I would like is more digging on how the people who use the facilities in these places have any voice in what is actually being done. The Commons has the sense of the fundamental principle of the users are the managers, self-management. And the models we have seen look at the overview that there is something quality like a DDA or like a nonprofit that looks at a lot of the different parks together as a the organization plan. But underneath that, how are the people who are using it actually involved in the development of program and in the management and in the setting of priorities and so on. So that's what I would like a little more exploration of, because that's what we need to be amplifying in the work that we are doing in Ann Arbor. So that's as you look back over your engagements with the places you have looked, and looking to Chelsea and looking to Royal Oak, which is newly on the agenda of comparable places. The role of the consumer as also the producer is what I'd like more attention to. And I do think that Columbus, Indiana, where the Cummins engine company has played a very strong corporate role in encouraging the development of a central commons-like facility, would be worth our exploration as we think about major investors who would say this is part of what I want my image in the town and its future to look like, which seem to be quality in some of the other places you have looked at to be an anchor in the initiative. So I hope that you can take a look at what actually went on in Columbus, Indiana with the Cummins engine company. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alan. So I think before we go into the other comparable or other working groups, I think I really would like to ask if there's a level of comfort around pushing this challenge for them, and I think maybe 3 to 4 days prior to the next Council of the Commons meeting is sufficient to have materials back in, but I'd like to get a level of comfort as to if that's a viable point in time to submit something around really what the working group's goals are for the next several months, what the roadmap is to those goals, and then how they further the next phase of the process, through a formal planning process, I think is another good question. And there could be other questions too that folks like to have, but I would start with those three. Does that sound like something that other folks feel is a good idea?
Could you repeat those three?
What the goal of the by the end of this calendar year of each working group is, what the roadmap is to that goal, meaning what steps do they think that each working group will take, and then finally, how does the goal further the future plan for a formal transformation of the space or formal use of the space? Alice, you had your hand up.
I know, but I dropped my mouse and many disasters here. I want to mention that I know there is a great deal of support in the community for this. We're here because of the public, and I'm just afraid we're going to lose our support. This is worrying, especially lately when I hear the enthusiasm from someone for this whole thing, someone who really worked hard, that I didn't know worked hard on the ballot initiative. I didn't work that hard on it, frankly. But that kind of enthusiasm is not what I see developing, and not what I see us developing by showing progress. And that's why I say this, and I'm very concerned that we're losing track of the enthusiasm that we had at the time, and that we can't afford to lose. And when we are confused about who's doing what and why, it makes it all the more imperative that working groups, which are more flexible and more responsive, perhaps, and can bring in members of the public who are enthusiastic and might be able to help us. I mean, I think that's how Caitlin got here. But that was almost overwhelming, and didn't, I hope that it was a source of regenerating some enthusiasm. I just don't know, because I don't have a sense that we know where we're going. So if we can meet the challenge that you posed, that would be good. So I agree with Frank. We need to be clear about what this challenge is and what it means to our work.
So I guess in response to that, do you think that the three questions accurately capture a destination that will help build that momentum or that clarity?
I think it's perfectly fine. And you know, three questions are good. That's it. Because those should cover a great deal of, it's a broad spectrum, and it's not just the comparable communities that need to do it, but I see that there are other working groups that may have trouble moving their progress along and having something to show for it by that time, but at least they could show how they're going to get there.
Okay. Frank?
Yeah, I just kind of in response to Alice, I do actually see increased involvement and enthusiasm, and Caitlin is a case in point. We're just thrilled to have her energy, excitement, background, and knowledge. And there are other people who are coming into this. Matt Altruda has been mentioned before, who actually voted against Prop A, but now is enthusiastically for the park and commons and understands its potential value. So, you know, I'm always looking for positive signs, and over the past few months, and talking to potential donors, we've gotten a few new commitments, and I think others are potential financial support are out there, and that will, you know, over the next short while, hopefully we'll get this RFP fully funded and move this thing along. But yeah, I have to say I'm spending more time on this than I ever thought I would at my advanced age, but shy of Alan's age. But you know, I have increasing confidence that this project will move forward.
Thanks, Frank. So I'd like to ask that we proceed with those three questions, and we'll put them in an email here, send them out to the group, so that, you know, not for response, but for note. And we'll ask that each of the working groups, maybe 3 days before the next Council of the Commons meeting, submit everything. Heather can collect it, and then we can discuss each of them at the meeting, and that can be a major part of our agenda for the next discussion. So I'll put together the three questions in an email and that date, and then I'll ask Heather to forward it around and go from there. Alice?
Can those questions be in the minutes?
Well, I think we're on pretty basic minutes, but I'm happy to put them in an email and have them sent around so that there's a record of them. We can put them into the packet. Alice?
Well, I'm losing my train of thought because of everything that's going on around me, but I don't want to sound pessimistic. I just, this is if anybody has looked at what I've done earlier, you can see, I mean, I put a lot into this 12 years ago, and I don't want to stymie anything, but I'm not even sure who the working groups are and what they're doing. We still haven't put that information of who is, if somebody from the public goes, oh, I'm interested in what they're doing, how can I find out more? Who do they go to? And maybe they have something to help us with. I mean, I just think it seems so isolated. And Adam, I think it's wonderful that you're going to have these conversations. I think that there are people in the public who could go to people and say, hey, I had this idea about it, because they're allowed to go. Other people are allowed to go and talk. If we had a whole cadre of people talking it up besides us, wouldn't it be wonderful? It would give them a sense of ownership as well. But we don't have a way for those people to get involved, because it's very hard to get involved with something that isn't seen. It's not out there. It's not happening yet. And so I hope I'm not just being confusing, but it is confusing to me, because I hear that Parks is going to manage the RFP and it costs this much to get the RFP written. But if Parks is doing it, where are they getting their money? And are we being treated in a separate way from other parts of the city that send out RFPs and get funding from other grant opportunities and so forth?
Alice, I do want to say, I know there's a lot of side conversation around this. There's not been any decisions on this. And, I was part of I gave the PAC presentation, and I have been part of other conversations prior to. And I feel very confident that we'll be able to work something out, that the goal should be to continue to raise money towards the funding the RFP, work on seeing if we can phase the RFP. And I really think that the PAC presentation was warmly received. I know there are a lot of sidebar conversations. I don't think it would be news to me if there's any decision being made. It would also be news to me that any decision could be made absent people who are doing the majority of the fundraising. I don't see how that works very well. So I really, I wouldn't worry about the sidebar conversations unless they're coming from, somebody's mouth who has authority over that. I've not heard that from somebody's mouth who has authority.
I think I'm slightly misinterpreted, but that's okay. I guess I'm taking the role tonight of speaking for people who haven't been able to speak, who have asked, where's it going? What's happening? When are we going to know something? So I apologize if I sound like I'm being pessimistic, but we have been working at this a long time, and we don't have much to show for it at this point. And I hope it's not internal slow walking or something like that, but I don't see many answers to it. We don't vote on anything. We don't send anything to council. We don't have a hint as to when we will have an RFP. And that means we can't tell people when they'll see something, when they'll see a change, when they'll see progress. And I really search for how we can do that, and keep on going constructively and with energy, because we are getting some crosstalk. I can think of 2 meetings before this where we thought one thing was true and then it wasn't. And then the next time, something else was true and then it wasn't. And that comes from staff, from other people that are familiar with the situation. It comes through all the time. So I just had to say it out loud. I hope that we can take these 3 questions and make some progress somehow.
Okay. Erica?
Yeah, thanks. I think some of the frustration that folks are voicing is probably fair, in terms of kind of feeling a frustration about things, wondering what progress is being made. I do think it's useful for the commission to think about, we know what our current bylaws say in terms of being an advisory group to council. That's useful. I think it's also important to think about what the role of commissions are in the city, and to acknowledge that this commission was set up very differently than other commissions. And I think that there was a good desire in doing so, but in doing so, it was a bit of an experiment, right? And so kind of thinking about whether or not the formation of this committee is producing the results that we desire is perhaps useful at this point in the process as well. It's a compilation of a few different nonprofit organizations, of representatives from city commissions, of community members. And, Alice, you mentioned wondering how people can get involved in this initiative. We have 2 nonprofit organizations that exist in town, both of which are represented on this commission, but typically within my experience within the community is that when people are very passionate about a subject, they often get involved in those nonprofit organizations. And that the city fills a different function sometimes in terms of a commission like this is really about advising kind of next steps about how we move something forward. Now, obviously, we've been trying to work on development of an RFP. The city has provided a certain amount of funding and said that the rest needs to be privately matched. And part of it's been privately matched. And now we're kind of in this holding period where it's a little unconventional for a city commission to even be talking about fundraising. But we are, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's unconventional in terms of the process. And so acknowledging that is maybe something that the fundraising committee needs to work on as we get back together in the next meeting. But I think it might be useful for us as a commission to also think about about the formation of this group. This is and how other initiatives have moved forward productively in the community in the past. I know the skate park is something that's a smaller example that often gets cited, and that has largely existed with the private fundraising existing outside of the city, and then a nonprofit organization approaching the city to see it move forward. Now, obviously, that model doesn't translate entirely well to this type of space, which is why we started bringing up ideas like conservancies and looking at best practices in terms of comparable communities and looking at how those formations happen. But I think that, I guess hopefully my point has been made now, in terms of we're in a bit of an experimental phase, and sometimes it's worthwhile to stop and make sure that the processes and kind of organizational structure that we're using is getting towards our goals as well.
Erica, I appreciate your comments. I do wish that we would stop talking about the skate park and skateboard park as an example. It serves a very specific community. They have very targeted programs, and we are looking at something entirely different. Our community is the community, and it's very diverse. So that's one thing. I think Camilla even touched on this idea too. It's a very diverse community. We do not have a specific targeted group, and except it may seem that way. And furthermore, I still don't have an answer to whether, even though this is a unique and unusual, not unconventional structure that we're dealing with, I get the sense that we're being held to a sort of a typical standard, I guess. But I don't understand. I do not know if a private group paying for an RFP is the common way of dealing with it. We're expected to do it the ordinary way through the templates and all this stuff, but is everybody else having to pay for their own community project, for an RFP for a community project? Maybe not. But even if they are, it's a very unique project. As you said, there's some unconventionality to it. And I just don't see the answers, the questions and matching the answers, or vice versa. So we don't ever know, even the facts of the structures we're dealing with, even the facts of the revenues that have been associated with this, and so on and so forth. We just don't have those facts. And why we don't, I don't know.
Well, I think, to be honest with you, unless there are specific updates around the other working groups, I think it would actually be in our benefit to just really dive in and push the questions. I just sent them to Heather. And why don't we just plan on doing that for this next meeting?
Have something to report.
Well, it seems like there would probably be update on these other questions, but I do think that the process of the RFP and what we're looking for requires focused attention, and maybe also whether the form of organization that we have is actually functional to the task that we have. And I would point out that in the resolution of the City Council that followed some previous resolutions, that established the initiating committee as an on-the-ground group to work toward carrying out the recommendations of the Center of the City Task Force, and to help in the development of the Council of the Commons. That was the main substance of that resolution, at the end of which was put on a formal structure of the Council of the Commons, which was actually in tension with the sense that the Council of the Commons is developed out of the activists and activities actually of the place. That is, of the commoning activities. Out of that comes the organizational structure that has liaison with all the city agencies and with advisors and so on, but is basically out of the working groups that are working with energy or with childcare or with food or with music or with the actual endeavors. And we have been made ourselves as though we are some kind of authoritative or advisory body, but actually where the energy is supposed to come from is the people actually doing stuff. But we've been completely blocked in people actually doing stuff, aside from a few scheduled activities like the Peace Day coming up or the Earth Week last spring. because the DDA, which should have removed the cars immediately, and the revenue that came from the car parking should be in the fund for the development of the commons of the various activities there, as the city council said. That has been blocked. DDA doesn't want to talk about it, and it says they won't even talk about it till after the RFP is done and agreed upon. They need a whole new policy. And similarly, the city administrator, his first task was to get together the block group so all the potential partners in this would begin to see each other and talk together. And in the 2.5 years since that was his number one objective on this carrying out the recommendation of the task force, it has not been done at all, and left to our little working group that Sarah's working on.
Ellen, I want to stop a little bit here, because I feel like what we continue to rehash the past sins of previous individuals who've been in these roles, and I just, for one, this is not a productive use of our time at 9 o'clock at night, and it's got to be about 3 o'clock in the morning where you're at.
Yeah, like really 2:56.
Okay, so I understand that you're frustrated. I am frustrated as well. Okay. But us continuing to rehash the past for people who are not even employed by the city anymore is not going to be a productive use. I think this is part of the reason why I continue to emphasize the most important things we can do, be it meaning we people who care about making this progress this park go forward, is to finish raising the funds and get started on a formal planning process by people who actually know how to build a park. And I agree that this is a little awkward at this point in time to do that, but I feel like this is a vehicle that allows us to keep that ability alive. And I know from talking with Frank that we are making progress on doing that. And I wish it was faster, but we're making progress, and that's important. And I think that we will get there, and I think we will get there sooner than we think. But we've got to let this go. You know, I work with a very diverse coalition of folks who pay my bills every day, and I've seen this sins of the past come up a lot, and it kills everything. And at some point, we've just got to stop. So I'm going to stop there because I'm doing the same thing. Are there other items outside on the working groups that we would like to cover this evening?
Well, are we saying that the request for proposals element as to how we move forward on that is going to be on our agenda for next time around?
Yes, because it's part of a working group. Okay. All right. Why don't, in that case, I sent the questions to Heather. We will then ask Heather if you could send them out to everybody, and we'll go forward. Erica, you've got your hand up, and then we'll go into public comment.
Yeah, I sense that you're transitioning to public comment. I just wanted to take a moment to thank Camilla for, I know she's transitioning away from the commission. I appreciated her work on the commission here. I appreciate you taking the time to speak up today, Camilla, and kind of speak a little bit about how you felt, the ability for your voice to be heard here or not heard. And I think that's something maybe to reflect upon. Camilla has been a graduate student here, and it's the exact type of energy and experience and background that we kind of hope to draw to this. And I'm not sure that her reflection on her experience is necessarily what we would hope she would have, maybe we might hope that she would have had a different feeling at the end of this. And that's something for us to reflect upon moving forward in terms of how we engage and allow for different voices to be heard around this table, and being very conscientious of when we're speaking.
Fair point, very much so. Thank you, Camilla, for the time that you put into it. Okay. In that case, let's move into public comment. Heather, do we have any members of the public?
Yes, we have several with the hands raised. The person with the phone number that ends in 326, you can go ahead and speak.
Hello, this is Jeff Crockett, and I am here. I hope you can all hear me. I just want to tell you that I am super pumped up about the Commons for a number of reasons, but one of them is the exciting developments on the garden. And if I would encourage Camilla to join me over the garden, and just so that I can share with her all the volunteer time and hours that have gone into create beautiful gardens that include a lot of native plants to get pollinators there. And I would be happy to take you on a tour. But I am also pumped up because the Council of the Commons have received two huge gifts during the past year. And one comes from Robert Black, and the other comes from Caitlin Olmsted Phillips. These folks have a wealth of experience of activating public places. And I would encourage you to include these people in the working groups. I mean, it seems to me like a no-brainer. You include Caitlin in the fundraising and development aspect. Let me give you an example. We've wanted to get a mural on the Commons, and we have Mary Tiefels gave us a bid of 10 grand to put a mural on the north wall, the wall just to the north of the garden. So we have received, I attended Administrator Dahoney's session about how to improve the downtown. And at that session, I heard Larry Neeson speak, a local artist, about beautifying the downtown. I approached him after the meeting and said, you and I want to do the same thing. We want to beautify the downtown. And I think it would be wonderful for you to help us beautify the Commons with a mural by Mary Tiefels. Well, guess what? 2 days later, he came up with $5,000 to do this. And guess what? Less than 3 days later, Caitlin found a donor, a matching donor, for $5,000. We now have $10,000 that we collected within a week. And the reason that happened is because we articulated a clear vision of what we want. And I hope that this group articulates a clear vision with the help of the people on this committee and Robert Black and Caitlin Phillips. You will develop the vision you will need and take advantage of Caitlin's experience in getting donations, not just locally, but statewide and nationally. No one else has done that locally here yet. And she brings that perspective. Absolutely get her involved in the fundraising aspect of this project. And you're not going to be talking about getting 20 grand to fund an RFP. You're going to be talking about getting millions of dollars to fund the whole project. So I would encourage you to do that. I have never been more optimistic than I am right now. And I would encourage Erica to connect with Caitlin, because as I recall, Erica, you said you would be willing to get rid of the parking on the Commons if we came up with a plan for activating the Commons. Caitlin is developing that plan. Please work with Caitlin forward to do the programming that's needed so we can remove the parking and do short-term activation that will include providing sheltered seating, Wi-Fi, and an event space. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right, next person is Robert Black.
Thank you, Heather. Can you hear me okay? All right. It's hard to follow Jeff Crockett with anything because of his enthusiasm, and I must say that he has done more, in my opinion, to really activate the commons, engage the public, and bring people to a common vision around the gardens. And I absolutely love, I was sitting in the backyard of Jeff's house with him and his wife just last year, their beautiful garden. And his enthusiasm and ability to bring people together is really important. And I trust you would consider including him in this process as well. And I want to do a shout out to Camilla. I think she hit the nail right on the head. Congratulations to moving through your education. And also, let's give voice to all people here. Let's get this outreach going. It's what the initiating committee is actually trying to do. It's what you're trying to do. You have very wonderful allies at MLive Ann Arbor News. The idea of a mural or some other thing that can begin to represent this. You have music, you have art, you have food and plants, you have education. Joette Rioma and Project Grow is happening. Wild Ones with Bob Gracie, very dignified, well-respected person. Talk about education in the community. You are doing it. And I just want to do the thing that I have done in every single meeting. There is no other person who has been your loyal supporter than me. I have been to every one of your meetings and listened to all of your stuff except for 2. And I've heard everything you have said. And do not despair. You are on the right track. This is too important to lose faith here. Alice is right. Just get it. Read her and Alan's responses in 2010 again, and be inspired by this thing. Put together your documents. What Adam is telling you, is suggesting you do, is to write this down. Work towards a report at the end of this year to council and advise them on your vision for this thing, because you are the one that's tasked with creating this. You see it from your hub point. Engage the initiating committee as your root of support for this, and then reach out to the DDA as an ally to you. And as Alan said, get these block partners talking with you in whatever way you can, however you can, as often as you can. Keep it transparent and public. You will be amazed what shows up, like this thing with the grants right now is really powerful. And I think what I do a lot with graphics and stuff is Amy Rowe and I made a lovely poster that was shown for this group about the center of the city that was shown at the Leslie Science Center, which, by the way, my partner Wayne Appleyard and I were the designers of that project, which is serving thousands of people in the community to teach about sustainable design. But do the outreach, do some other things. I know that people have talked about using the Spark Center. Take a walk, get Matt Altruda involved more, and just do this so that you can start to show people that you are actually making progress. Last thing I'll say, activate the space gently is one of the words that Caitlin said. Take the time to learn as we go. This is not a one and done slam dunk design a park process. Get this RFP out so you can set the stage for it, the groundwork, the biodynamics of it, the biophilic space, and then issue a second part of the IFP to create a phase 1 build, but let the rest of the build unfold with contributions from the rest of the community. First Martin Corporation, U of M Credit Union, AADL, and the other companies around there that will support this in ways that you can't even imagine yet. So don't be too stuck on a conventional idea to create a slam dunk park design done. It will evolve as you grow this vision. But start with the vision and get a brand as soon as you can so that people can understand this is your center of the city. This is our center of the city. And we all belong to it and we all have a voice. Come to Peace Day and learn about how to make restorations to others too. So good luck. Don't despair. Remember Margaret Reed's comment. Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. So please keep the faith and just do your work. You're doing great. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
All right, the person with the phone number ending in 340.
Greetings. I'm Luis Vasquez, resident of the First Ward. I also just wanted to thank Camilla for her bold statement. And I think this council really needs to reflect upon what exactly she said. And also just observed how she voted with her feet and dropped off of the conversation. That's very telling. Now, I'm one of the 47% of voters who voted against Proposal A of 2018. So yes, I am a critic of this council, yet I have the best intentions of Ann Arbor at heart. And I would encourage you, or urge you actually, to make sure that Liberty Plaza is not forgotten, not neglected in this whole process. In fact, I think Liberty Plaza should be the focus of your efforts now. There has been nothing stopping the proponents of the Library Lot Park from activating Liberty Plaza. There has been nothing council from advocating activation, better activation and improvement of Liberty Plaza, which is part of these comments. By getting Wi-Fi at Liberty Plaza, by getting a public lavatory placed at Liberty Plaza, and other amenities, like a splash pad for kids at Liberty Plaza. You don't have to pierce the surface warranty, as has been pointed out many times to your council, that doing such warranty of the parking lot underneath the library lot. Activate Liberty Plaza. And somebody should, from your group, should educate Caitlin about the politics that have gone on around and behind what you're trying to do. She seemed woefully unaware and started at ground zero again. I think Camilla hit it right on the head. She's heard this all before. I've observed many of these meetings. You guys are just spinning your wheels, and something needs to be done. Or else, my opinion is that we should put this back on the ballot in a future election, either through a millage to support the efforts, or to put it back on the ballot just to see what Ann Arborites think right now, because that vote in 2018 just split Ann Arbor down the middle, and I think you're seeing the effects of that right now. So thank you for hearing me out, and I hope you all have a good evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Luis. Anyone else?
I think that's it. Nobody else with their hands raised.
All right. Thank you. With that, I think we've got some action items for next week, or next month, rather. Sorry. And I would say check your emails for those things. And otherwise, could we have a motion for adjournment?
So move.
So move. All right. As motion and seconded, all in favor, say aye. All right. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.